Okay, my guest today is author and Navy Captain Brett Crozier. And you may remember him from a big news story in April of 2020 when he had a tough decision to make and he had to get his sailors hotel rooms. I don't think he followed right protocol or whatever, but it caused a stir. But also a lot of people praised his decision. So whether you agree or disagree with that decision, you can check out his book and learn more how he came to make that decision. And the book shows basically his whole philosophy on life. And we're going to touch on some of those principles in this interview coming right up. Yeah, that's the cool thing about podcasts. I have a little bit more freedom, a little bit more time, can really get into it. So
yeah, they're generally better conversations, and if you do it right, and you've been doing this for a while, they're just good conversations, and I think that's what connects with the wider audience, right? They feel like they're in the living room or at the bar with us is the goal.
Yeah, it's when I did enter your name into YouTube this morning, I was looking, I was like, it's got to be a few interviews that he did or something. I couldn't find anything, but I did see, Jack Carr. He was on Rogan, and they were talking about you. Did you see that clip?
I did not see that. No, I should look that up.
Yeah, he was praising you, and he was saying something doesn't sit right with this whole thing. I think it was before all the details came out, but yeah, he had your back, which I was like, oh, okay, cool. Good. It seems like that was kind of the general consensus after everything went down, is that most people supported you.
Yeah, I think I had a tremendous amount of support. I mean, there were naysayers, as there always are, but obviously a unique position. I was still in the military, still active duty, and wasn't in a good place to want to speak out publicly for or against everything that took place. It just wasn't. When you're active duty military, you do what you got to do, and then you either sit down and shut up, or you wait till you get out. And I hope the real thing here is my book coming out now that I'm retired, or I retired a year ago, is in no way like me just trying to tell my side of the story. It's much more than that, and it's really maybe to explain to people why I made the decision I did, whether they agree with it or not. It just kind of gives them some background on who I am, and really hopefully a way to share a lot of the stories and pay tribute to all the amazing people I got to serve with over my 30 years. So
exactly, and I think your book does a good job of that. It kind of gives a background as to basically your whole life philosophy, your experiences, and why you think the way that you think and why you feel the way you feel. And so the first chapter, Never Turn Down Espresso, this is a really interesting concept that it kind of goes throughout the book, is just finding common ground, right? Like you're talking about watching The Nutty Professor with these people from Pakistan. And how do we do that today in America? Because I feel like that's something that is kind of lacking. I mean, although like I feel like that's what we used to do. We used to go to concerts or movies or sporting events, and we're able to bond with people from different backgrounds. And now it just feels like people are so locked into their tribes. Like even doing that is, people are skeptical of one another.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think how we talk to one another matters, and how, really more importantly, how you listen to one another. We all have different backgrounds and different experiences. And I mean, in the military, in a leadership position, I like to talk to people with the goal of finding that middle ground, or finding the commonality, because as a leader, what you're trying to do are trying to motivate people, right? You're trying to get them inspired to do work that could be hard and arduous, and combat could be deadly. And they're not just going to do it because you tell them to do it. Ideally, they're going to do it and do it well because you've inspired them. And I think if you really want to inspire somebody, whether you're in the military or business or the nonprofit world, or just raising kids, I mean, you need to find a common ground so you can relate to them. So I think, I think we have a lot of work as a country, as a nation, to figure this out, because we're not always headed the right direction, as we know. But I think it starts with learning how to listen, and we have to. I think a lot of it's based on fear. I mean, I think when you're scared, when you're worried about losing something, when you're worried about somebody else, getting a leg up on you, therefore, you lose, this whole zero-sum game mentality. That is a difficult way to approach life. If you and I assume that for us to be successful, only one of us can be successful. Therefore, if you're successful, then that means that I'm not. That means I lose. Well, what if you approach it differently? What if, you're successful and I can be successful, and we can kind of leverage that, and we might have different backgrounds, but together, it's not just 1 or 0, it's 1 + 1 = 2. And that's a concept I think in today's environment we forget. And we forget how being part of that larger team actually makes you stronger. And we tend to go back to our tribes and our camps, and we're fearful of the other side getting a leg up, and therefore I'm going to lose. And that's just a way to approach a fearful way to approach life, in my opinion. And if you're scared, then that's why you're going to make those kind of decisions, because you're scared and fearful that you're going to lose. Well, I don't know. Be confident. Understand your strengths. Understand that your strengths might actually be able to help other people, and their strengths actually might be able to help you. But that's quite a large philosophical discussion. And I do talk about it in the book, because I think that's what I learned along the way was, I try to tell the stories in the book through the people I met, to the people, not just in the military and the Navy, but also, the guys from Pakistan that I related to, because we were able to show the nutty professor on a small ship, cargo ship in the middle of the Persian Gulf at the time. And we found that was a common ground that allowed us to get along and work well together. Or sharing tea with the Egyptian colonel that I met, in Beni Suef, Egypt, during a big exercise. And that's just a way we related. But it was beyond that. It was every tour I ever had. It was every person I met. And I try to live by that today, and try to teach that to my boys today and the people I work with. And we're stronger when we work together, and you have to get to know one another to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's great advice. And that's one of the things I love. I mean, I've never traveled as much as you and been around the world, but just traveling even within the state or the country, or going to Mexico and stuff like that, like just talking to different people from different, like I remember going to New York. I was so excited. And one of the best things about going to New York was just talking to New Yorkers and talking about New York sports and typical things to do in New York. I mean, that was just, I can't imagine like Pakistan. That's totally different ball game there.
Yeah, and we lived in Japan for a couple of years with my wife and kids, and that culture can be intimidating. It's big. It's Tokyo is like really the largest city in the world. We generally don't know how to read hiragana and some of the Japanese characters you see, but the reality is, we're all kind of the same, and it's pretty easy to relate to Japanese, even if you don't speak Japanese. Most of them actually speak pretty good English, so that helps. But everywhere we ever went, anywhere we ever traveled to, if you get over that initial hesitation about, hey, I don't know how to get to the store, how do I call a cab, you figure that stuff out. You really do. And I think, one, there's a lot of life lessons in that. I think, two, you gain confidence in your ability to adapt to a new situation. And then three, you really get to understand that culture and the people. And then you look at it differently. When you see it on the news, you think about it differently, because you've been there and you know those people, or what's motivating them. So I think travel is great. And there's one thing I could do more of in my life would be to travel more in places I have never been, and to get to know the people and learn about them and all the cultures and stuff. So many more countries to go.
Yeah, the customs. Like I thought that was so cool. The part about, I mean, that's what that chapter of the espresso thing is, the coffee with the Italians. And it's funny, my brother was in Italy in the army. So I asked him, I was like, is this true that so what is it? The thing they drink coffee at 9 a.m. and then 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. and they come and they don't sit and drink their coffee. They come in and they stand and they just do like a shot of espresso.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, very true. In Naples or Napoli, Italy, they, where it's kind of the home of pizza and espresso. Yeah, it's very quick. It's almost like a smoke break that we think of in the old days when people used to smoke a lot. But they'd go and get their shot of espresso, and it's really good. Like, people now, I think if someone hears this and goes to Starbucks and orders espresso, there's a good chance it's not going to be as good as it is in Naples. But they have perfected it over the years, right? Hundreds of years. And it's kind of sweet. It's super strong. Almost, sometimes they put sugar in it, but you go down there and you hang out, you get a shot of espresso, you talk a little bit, and then you go right back to work. It's not like now where you might get a 16-ounce coffee from a Starbucks and then sit around and drink it for a half hour. I mean, they're quick and in and out, but I do. And I like, even today, I actually use the Italian espresso machine that I bought over 10 years ago, and we use it every morning. So it's good. Although I do sit down when I drink it usually, just because I'm at home, but
sure. No, that's really cool. I love little stuff like that. It's so fascinating. So you started out as a helicopter pilot, and then you made the transition to jets. And part of that was based on your, I mean, who didn't love Top Gun? But that was a big inspiration for it, partly. And also, what I love this is it's like, you wanted to, it's because more education and more training, and you thought that's important to happiness and success in life. I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think that's like important for everybody to kind of challenge themselves and do things out of their comfort zone to grow and improve?
Absolutely. I think that Yeah, I think education is key, whether it's formal education or it's just picking up a book and reading a book about something to learn, or like we talked about earlier, talking to people and getting to learn about their culture. I think people should always find ways to grow and learn. And in my career in the Navy, yeah, I was 16 when Top Gun came out, so that left certainly a pretty formidable impression in my young life. And so when I went to join the Navy and started out in naval aviation, I flew helicopters for about 10 years and loved it and loved everything about flying helicopters. It's like flying helicopters like a pickup truck with you and a couple buddies, and you don't know what you're going to do. You might pick up some stuff. You might fly the mail around. You might pick up you might go look for a submarine. You might go look for enemy ships. You might just circle around the Hawaiian Islands like I did and check out surf occasionally. So I loved it. But given the opportunity later in my career to go fly fighters, and particularly the F-18, I knew that it was a chance, one, to kind of scratch the itch from when I was a young kid and saw Top Gun, but two, a way to really grow and learn more about the Navy. Because now I'm going to learn about tactical aviation. I'm going to learn about carrier operations. I'm going to learn about how air wings work and that whole other facet of naval aviation that I knew would make me a better leader. It'd be fun too. I mean, I knew it'd be fun and exciting, and that was certainly one of the draws, but I knew I would learn from that and be a better leader because I'd know more now about how a broader part of the Navy worked. So I think it is true in life. And I never shied away from that, even later in my career, after learning how to fly fighters and doing that for about 10 years. And I got the opportunity to go to Navy's nuclear power school in Charleston. And so now very technical, this like 2-year master's program, essentially in nuclear engineering. And what you're learning is how to operate reactors on that we have in submarines or reactors that we have on aircraft carriers. And that's a requirement to be a XO, deputy or the commanding officer, the CEO of an aircraft carrier. So we got another chance. The Navy was willing to invest in me to spend time training and growing. So I think all told, in my 30-year career, I spent over 10 years in a classroom or academic environment, which is pretty amazing as an organization that they invest that much in you. But even the other 20 years, you're learning all the time. And I think even now that I'm out of the Navy, I'm finding ways to learn. I think it's a great lesson for anybody. It's the whole idea. You learn like you're going to live forever. Why would you stop and rest on what you only know today? Why would you not try to learn more? Whether that's in business, whether that's in your family, whether that's in some recreational activity, all those are, I think, just great ways to live your life. And I think I always find it exciting to learn new things. Challenging, yes, right. You have to be confident that you're going to have to do something you're not good at. And when you get older in life, you like being good at things. So, you have to be confident enough that you're going to maybe pursue something that you don't know anything about. But that's also fun because with that comes experience, with that comes confidence, and with that gives you, I think, better perspective on how the world operates. So I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had flown the helicopters, but that's very different than flying a jet. So, I mean, did you have any sort of like, had you done like, you must have at least been on roller coasters and thought, okay, I could, or did you try bungee jumping or some sort of like adrenaline thing where you're like, okay, I can do this? Cause I think there's some people that could, I probably myself, I don't know that I could be in a fighter jet like that. I would freak out.
Yeah, I mean, the Navy's got incredible, like the Air Force and everybody else, they have an incredible training program. So you start in simulators and you work your way up to actually in the cockpit on the runway and taking off. Helicopters are different, but also very similar that, once you're airborne and, a couple hundred feet above the ground, they operate the same way. I mean, the same mechanics of flight basically are working. You have instrumentation, you're flying, different routes. You can fly instrument approaches in the weather. So when you're in a fighter, you're doing the same thing. It just happens faster. Where it's really different, I mean, a helicopter, you have to be able to hover. So the hardest thing you learn in a helicopter, and it takes you like, 6 or 7 flights, is how to hover a helicopter. Now, modern helicopters have a little bit better avionics, but we start out in the Navy on, the time was this an old Jet Ranger, like the ones you see all the time for the old news shows. And we spent a lot of time learning to hover. And I was determined. I thought for sure I'd figure it out like on my second flight, but it takes like 6 flights to figure out, to actually be able to hover, keep the helicopter in one place, 5 to 10 feet above the ground and not like swerving all over the place. So then when you jump in a fighter, it's different, right? A fighter, you need a runway now, right? You need a runway or an aircraft carrier to be able to take off and land. So whereas a helicopter can land in a parking lot, can land on a beach, can land on the back of a small ship, which is challenging in its own way. A fighter, you need that runway. So in some ways, I always joke like helicopters like being on a bird. I mean, you can take off anywhere and land anywhere. Whereas a fighter, you need that runway. And that means in an aircraft carrier, you need the catapult to launch you. in a couple hundred feet, and you need the arresting gear on the back end of an aircraft carrier to land a fighter, going 150 miles an hour to zero in about 250 feet. So it happens pretty quickly. But it was fun. I had some experience, I think, in the back of smaller planes or flying the T-34, which is a small prop plane the Navy teaches you on. But when I went through the training for fighters and F-18s, I felt like I didn't find. I mean, there's challenging moments of it because things happen fast. But I think that my time as a helicopter pilot prepared me well for that. And then I just had to learn how to do things faster and potentially by myself if I'm flying a single seat fighter like an F-18.
So what's scarier, flying the fighter jets or being in charge of a nuclear reactor on a ship? Like those both seem very daunting.
They're both different, right? I mean, when you're in a fighter, there were moments where it's, it's by myself, and whether the enemy's shooting at you or you're running low on gas, or you've got to land at night in heavy seas on the back of an aircraft carrier. Those are some moments where it can be pretty intimidating, and you're by yourself. You have plenty of people there talking to you, radars, all that stuff. But it's you, the machine, and you have to, overcome any fear you might have to be able to do it successfully. Aircraft carrier, you've got essentially a team of 5,000 people. So, if there's ever a time you feel like someone's got your back, it's on an aircraft carrier when you got 5,000 people that are, taking care of the reactors, taking care of the runway, worrying about the fuel, the food, the engineering, the computer systems, all that stuff. So, I don't think an aircraft carrier there were moments where you're like, I hope this works out. Like, let's hope that ship gets out of my way like they're supposed to. And you're maneuvering the carrier as best you can, or you're blowing your whistle to try to get them out of your way. But for the most part, I felt like, it's when you have that many people on the same team, all trying to do the same thing, there wasn't a lot of stuff that intimidated me. I mean, there was no nation that could stand toe to toe with us, with an aircraft carrier, with all the airplanes and stuff you have. There's things out there that I was concerned with, but I don't think I was intimidated by anything. And I just think it goes back to, aircraft carriers are pretty big beasts. They've got a lot of weapons. They're built really well, and you've got 5,000 people there to help you fight it. So I felt like, if anything, I was more worried about other people being scared by us, and as they see us steaming around wherever we wanted to go, because that's the nature of, the law of the seas. You can kind of go where you need to go.
Yeah. So you talk about being scared sometimes of things, but more that they would be scared of you. Did you ever see like a UFO or anything like that as a fighter pilot or as a ship captain?
No, I never did. I was on an aircraft carrier when there was some discussion about another flight that had taken off earlier that might have seen some stuff off the coast of Southern California. I never got to see that or the radar, but that will tell you they were convinced they saw it. They were, these are guys that, you'd go to war with if you had to. And they were pretty convinced what they saw did not make sense by the normal laws of physics that we've been trained on. So seeing their reaction, and even now, some of these guys are talking about it, but makes you wonder, right? When you have folks.
Have you seen the footage? There's footage of.
I've seen the footage now. Yeah,
it is like puzzling. You kind of go, okay, is this? I mean, it could be some sort of fake thing, but it's definitely. If we don't have the answer, it makes you wonder what it is.
Yeah, I'd like to just think they're all on our side. Somehow I just don't know who runs them, but they're on our side. And certainly if they're off the coast of Southern California, they know that the weather's good out here and they want to hang out at this side. So that works in our favor, I think.
Well, yeah, that's kind of so that kind of is a good transition to chapter 3 here, where you talk about just when in doubt, be kind. And I feel like that's another thing that's a good message to put in the book, because I feel like that's another thing that goes back to our country being so divided. That's just like lacking. Like, how do we get that message out to the rest of the country to be kind?
Yeah.
'Cause there's always that thing of like nice guys finish last. So is it possible? It's possible to sway too far the other way and be passive, right? You need to be assertive, but I also think like there's too much aggression or passive aggressiveness and not enough kindness.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about, and it's true in the military and outside, how you've got to have discipline, and you got to rule with an iron fist. I think discipline's important in anybody's life. I think, I'm hard on myself to make sure I work out, that I eat well, that I get enough sleep, that, and I think that's fine. Everyone should be hard on themselves, but it doesn't mean you have to be hard on anyone else. Like, you should be somewhat compassionate towards others. And there's probably a famous philosopher that had that same quote, be hard on yourself, be kind to others. And that's kind of my mantra. Is like, I'm going I'm going to work out as much as I can. I'm going to stay in good shape. I'm going to make sure, I spend time with the family. I'm going to make sure I, do my job as well as I can. But I'm going to be kind with others as they're trying to figure out life and figure out what's important to them. And just because I don't see somebody else working out as hard as I do, I'm not going to judge them, right? There's nothing gained by me judging anybody but myself against my own standard. I think as a leader, think about an aircraft carrier. When you're the CEO of an aircraft carrier, everybody knows who you are. Everybody knows the authority that you have. Everybody knows the responsibilities that you have. So it doesn't take much for you to get someone to do what you want. And therefore you don't have to do it with any kind of edge. You don't have to be mean about it. And I guess that's really was my point in that chapter was, it's okay to be nice. Like I never regretted being nice to somebody. But yeah, I'm sure there's people that take advantage of that. I got it. But I just, to be mean to somebody when I don't understand their background, understand why they made the decisions, it's more an opportunity to have a conversation. But I always found that, by erring to the side of kindness, the whole golden rule, treat others how you want to be treated, that never, I never regretted that. And that's no matter whether I was in charge of myself in an airplane or whether I was in charge of an aircraft carrier with 5,000 people. And I think in the end, particularly the military, why do people fight? Like, why do people go into combat? Do they do it because they have to? Do they do it because mom and apple pie? Well, maybe a little bit, but I would argue, you can ask, all kinds of folks on this. People go into combat. People are willing to risk their lives for the people next to them, and for the idea they're part of a team, and the people, that someone's going to have their back. And so that means as a leader, you want to build a strong, positive culture where they know that, hey, I'm going to go fight for that guy because he's going to get my back and he's going to help me out. And that's a commodity that you have to build. That's trust. It's a culture of trust. And I'd argue if you go around and with the authority you have as a leader, whether you're a CEO of a company or a CEO of an aircraft carrier, and then on top of that, you're mean and hard on people more than you should be, then in the end, you're not building that trust. In the end, they're going to do their job, but only because they have to. And if it comes down to combat, they're probably only going to fight, because they have to and not because they feel like they're part of a larger team. So I think it comes down to how do you really inspire people? And I always found that not being soft, not being passive, not giving everybody ice cream every day. That's not what it means to be nice. It means to understand that people have challenges, and you go out of your way to make their jobs and their lives easier. And you can do it with a smile on your face, and you can sometimes give them benefit of the doubt. And I think in the end, it comes back in kind, and it helps that culture that we're kind of talking about. So, I think you can't lead from a position of fear. So if you're leading passively, if you're doing that because you're fearful of how people are going to perceive you, or you want to be so well liked as a leader that that's what motivates you, well, that's not going to work. You have to have standards, you have to have goals, you have to have a common mission. You can lead with kindness from an assertive standpoint, and that's kind of a fine distinction. But if you do, I think it's amazing what you can get from your crew, your company, your team. And I think that's kind of the important distinction there is, do nice guys finish last? I think that's, and it depends on how you define that. Do strong leaders that happen to be also, passionate and have empathy, I guarantee you they're not finishing last. I think those are the leaders that we've seen excel and do well, and have a legacy that people want to follow and do well. And they built companies that last decades, right? That's the kind of niceness I'm talking about. That's what I mean to be kind, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I worked in the schools, so I saw that in the schools with teaching styles, right? You'd see that with if a teacher was too passive, the kids would just walk all over them. If they tried to rule too hard with an iron fist, then the kids turned against them. So I'm assuming it's probably the same as the CEO or in your position or any kind of leadership thing. You kind of have to earn their trust, but also their respect.
Right. No, and that's important. And again, it goes back to, you've got to know your people. You've got to understand what motivates them and how to communicate with them. And you can't do that by hiding in your office. You can't do that by hiding on the bridge of a ship. You have to get out and about and talk to people. And that's, I like that. I enjoy meeting new people and learning new things about them. So for some people it's harder, but I think as a leader, it's critical that you understand that is an important part of what I think successful leadership is all about, is knowing your people, how to motivate them so you can take care of them when you need to.
Yeah. Well, in the other chapter 4, you talk about prioritizing. Explain this. You have this analogy with the
Mhm.
jar with the rocks and the pebbles and the sand, and like taking care of the big things first. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, no, I learned that when I was a young lieutenant. I had a boss that told me that. But the idea being is your day, your life, whatever, you got this jar, and that defines the capacity of how much stuff you can get done. And then meanwhile, you got this bucket and you've got all the things you hope to accomplish in life. And you've got some big things, like one big rock could be your family, or one big rock could be, you know, being a good fighter pilot. You've got smaller things like, like I want to have a nice car. Or I want to make sure my car runs, or I want to, you know, I don't know, pick something. I want to make sure I go on a vacation. You have all the little rocks, which are like answering emails, or, watching Netflix or binging Netflix. And I think it's important, and whether that jar is defining your work capacity, whether it's defining your life capacity, it's how you fill that jar up. Because everybody has has a limit, right? Everyone has a finite limit of what you can get accomplished. So the goal is if you start with all the little rocks, right? If you start with all the little rocks, which could be binge watching TV or answering emails excessively or always on your phone, well, you're going to fill that jar up to a level with just small rocks on the bottom. This is true. I mean, the physics here work out as well. Then when you try to put the other rocks on top, there's not going to be any room. You're going to run out of space in that jar. The idea being those big rocks now come in and they're going to rest on this bed of sand, as it were. The only way to do it and make it work is you figure out what those big rocks are. And like, what are your big priorities? Is your family? Okay. Well, that's a big rock. Put that in first in your jar. Is your health and well-being? Okay. Put that rock in there. Is it your professional competence and whatever, your training education? Okay. Well, then put that in there. Then once you have your big rocks in place, then you worry about the smaller stuff. You go to the medium-sized rocks. Like, okay, I want to take that weekend vacation to Vegas. You put that in there. And then so then at the end of the day, what's your last thing is all these little pebbles, right? The sand. It's all the emails. It's all the, it's the net. I mean, whatever it might be in your life, things that are not that important. I that if you didn't do them, it wouldn't matter, because now you've got the big important rocks in. But if you do it in that order, now you can take that sand and you can pour it in there and you can fill it in. It's going to fill around the physical, space around the bigger rocks, as it were, and you can actually get all the stuff in the jar. But if you do it in any different order, then it doesn't work. And I think that's true in life, meaning that you have to decide what your priorities are. You have to decide what's important to you, and you're going to make those your priorities and make your decisions based on the idea that I'm going to worry about that first. I'm going to worry about the other things last. So let's take it in the business world, like, what I'm doing now. If my only goal for the day is to make sure I answer all the emails I get, well, those are the little rocks, right? And I'm going to not spend the time I need on worrying about my staff or worrying about the big projects or all my, I work in the nonprofit world now. So community outreach, all those things are important, big rocks. Community outreach or big events, or, the employees' morale. Then if I don't focus on that first, then the problem is I'm going to spend all day on a computer answering emails, worrying about things that aren't important. And at the end of the day, I won't get to what really matters. So I think good leaders in business, in the military, they get this intuitively. They kind of understand the importance of that. And they don't worry about, sitting in front of a computer answering emails. They're making the big decisions. They're focused on the big rocks. And I think that's kind of what that whole analogy means. And it worked for me in my military career. It worked for me, I think, because I was able to balance time with family. I was able to focus on my career professionally. I was able to focus on the people I was taking care of. And I think if you do it well, by the end, you're going to get to the end, that whatever the end is, end of your career, into your life, you're going to feel like satisfied that you balance things accordingly.
Yeah, I know. I love that. And like you give examples in the book about like how you gave some of the sailors time off for their child's graduation. And your point on that was like, if you take care of people, give them extra time off, then they're going to work harder when they come back. So it sounds like that principle worked for you. What do you think about using that principle, like having a 4-day work week? Because I feel like that's something that I don't know why we don't do that. The 5-day work week just seems outdated, in my opinion. I think it'd be so much better I would rather work 12 hours a day, four days a week, than work 5-8. What do you think about that?
I think companies need to explore that. I mean, not everybody can do it. And, I look at my own company, it's something we're talking about trying to do. It's not easy to do and manage, right? You have to figure out how you provide all the services. You have to do that without having to hire extra staff. But I think if you figure it out, and the companies that I've studied that have done it well, that you're right. People people tend to want to work hard. If they're passionate about what they do and they like the culture and the mission, they're going to work hard no matter what. And if you can ask them just to work 4 hard days, but the reward's going to be 3 days off, then I guarantee that they're going to continue to work hard. I mean, they're going to give you that time. And I mean, we all know, I mean, in most cases, right, by the time you get home Friday after work, if you're not, if you haven't put any thought into it, you're going to roll through Saturday, get some stuff done. Sunday, you're going to want to rest a little bit. And the next thing you're back at work. Whereas 3 days gives you an option. That gives you some time. And, I actually, one of the things I explored when I was retiring was looking to work for the San Diego Police Department here. And they worked a 4-day on, 3-day off. It was pretty interesting. And they loved it because, when I did some ride-alongs and talked to the guys, and I ended up not going that path. I was more just curious and fascinated by what they do and the hard work they have to do. But they loved it because they're like, now I can actually work hard for 4 days. And it's hard, arduous work, as you can imagine, in any big city. But he's like, now I can actually take 3 days to travel somewhere. I can go to the Bay Area, I can go to Vegas, I can go to Mexico, and not feel like I'm just rushing in and out. And so I think companies should, they should continue to explore that option. I think the companies that do and do it well will attract more talent and people that understand that life work balance that we're always trying to talk about.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of a win-win. You're going to attract the better talent if you, and then they're going to be more successful. Yeah. And then it's a win-win for the employees because they're going to, assume most people would love that way better than the 5-8 hour days. I don't know.
I haven't met anybody.
You go to work, your day is pretty much shot anyway. It's not like you're going to go out and do something after work. Like, at least for me, when I was working 8 hour, I would just go home and I was done for the day.
Yeah. Cause you're all in for that day, whether it's 8 hours, 9, 10, whatever it is, you're all in and you are exhausted. But having known you have 3 days on one side of that, it's without a doubt, it's not easy to manage. And there's all kinds of state and federal laws you have to be aware of. But I know companies that are doing the research on it and trying to incorporate that. I guarantee they'll be successful. They're going to, if they do it right. But we are looking at it in my own company, and I think it's something if we can pull off the next year, we'd love to do that and give folks the time they need to really enjoy life on the outside and make them better employees.
Yeah. And that's the whole. The title of your book is "Surf When You Can," and that's chapter 7. And you kind of talk about that balance. Like, I feel like for me, I see people either working too hard or not enough. So how do you manage that balance? Because obviously you must have worked very hard to get to where you are. I can't imagine the schooling you went through, learning about nuclear reactors. That must have been very intimidating, but you did it. And then now you're still valuing, being able to take a break when you can. So how do you manage that balance? What's your advice for that?
Yeah. I like that. For me, being physical, whether it's working out on the ship or hiking with a family or surfing, which is what I've been doing a lot of lately. I know that I work better as a result of that. So, I like it. It's fun. It's enjoyable, particularly when the weather's good and the surf's good. And there's nothing better than getting up early and doing that for a couple hours. And I've got 3 sons. So inevitably I could always get 1 or 2 of them to go with me and we'd hang out together. So it's great. It was great family time as well. Could I do that 7 days a week? Well, one, I'm not that good. So no one would pay me to do that. But I like the balance. And I liked when I did that. It makes you, again, it goes back to like the 4-day work week. I knew I worked better. I knew I could use that time with surfing to kind of recharge my batteries and kind of think some bigger thoughts, think strategically, which I think is important for leaders. So whether you ski, you do yoga, you go to church, you read, I think everybody needs time to think. And for me, surfing is one of those things where I can get on the water. I don't have a phone. No one can text me. No one can call me. There's no emails to answer. I'm just worrying about surf, the lineup, the currents, the weather, the wind, everything else that goes on out there. And I knew it made me better at work, and it makes me better at work now as a result of that. If I can go get a morning session in before I go to work, which is some days are hard, but I know that I will actually work better the rest of the day. I'll just be in a better mood. I will look at things differently. But you're right. I think the question is, are people working too hard or not enough? It's probably a balance. I think people that are motivated by what they do and they're passionate about their mission, I think they're going to tend to want to work harder, right? Because they like what they do and they get recharged by that. I think that if people are not, or they work for bosses that are caustic or, have a toxic environment, well, then they're just going to punch the clock and they're not going to do any more than you ask. And they're going to leave at, at 5 or 4, whenever their workday ends, and you're not going to get anything else out of them. And if they don't like the project, they're just going to slow roll it because they're only doing it to get a paycheck. So I see both sides. I've seen it, you see it in the Navy a little bit too, but if you have the right culture, with the right leaders in place and the right mission, that you can inspire people, then you find that sweet spot, right? Where they're going to work hard, but it's fun and they enjoy it and they're recharged by it. But I think that's the key. I think that's how you bridge that gap between working too hard because you're just trying to make a lot of money, or not working at all because you don't like what you do. And I think, people kind of have to ask themselves, if they're on one extreme or the other, why is that? If you're working 7 days a week, well, why is that? Is it a startup company and you're working hard? Okay, well then, yeah, that's probably makes sense. That's you're all in. It's like you're a founder and you're starting a company. But if you're not working at all and you hate going to work, well then, Richard Branson, right, said, if you don't like what you do, then do something else, or find a different way to do it. And I think that's true as well. And we're seeing a little bit of that, particularly post-COVID, as people are exploring remote options and hybrid kind of work options. I think people are really trying to figure out how to achieve that balance so they can be passionate about what they do and enjoy the work when they're doing it.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that's just really missing in our country right now. I know for myself, like I was in education and I had a lot of time off, but I was miserable. If it didn't feel like it was enough. Right. And now I'm doing podcasting and I'm working harder than I've ever worked in my entire life. And I love it. It doesn't feel like I'm working at all. I mean, it's work obviously, but I'm loving it. And I'm setting my own schedule. I'm doing it on my own. So it's like, but it's something that I'm really passionate about. I feel like people need to find that. It's cool. You reference like Ferris Bueller in the book, which I love that movie, like how life is moves fast. And if you don't stop, you're going to miss it. So explain that principle, like in the rocking chair test. I've heard like Tony Robbins talk about that one as well.
Yeah. I think my wife taught me that one, but throughout my career and stuff, was the idea being at some point in your life, right, at the end, however you define the end, the idea is you're on a porch somewhere, you're on a rocking chair, you're talking to your spouse or your friend, and you're talking about your life. You're looking backwards, right? It's whenever you're no longer worried about what's coming, you're looking back and you're reflecting on all the things you did or didn't do throughout your life. And so it's a mindset of putting yourself in the future, look back now at where you are today, and a way to kind of decide, kind of help you make those decisions today. So, if you're making a decision about, should I go to Vegas and play craps all day? Oh, well, okay, maybe that may be fun, but or is that money spent better? Should you go, take your wife and go to Cancun and enjoy it? Well, in the end, which one of those is going to get you more satisfaction in the long run? For me, it was, more professional, right? It was when I was, was a Navy helicopter pilot, loved everything about it, but I had the opportunity to go fly fighters. And, there's about 5 or 6 a year that are selected to do that. So with this opportunity, I remember asking my wife, and I said, what do you think? It's a total career change. It's going to be challenging. It's back to school. This is all pre 9/11. So we didn't go into then 2 decades of combat. I said, so I said, I think I want to do it. And she's like, there's no doubt. When you're on that rocking chair in your future and you look back, if you had said no, or if you say no to the decision, she goes, I guarantee you're going to wish you had done it. Not saying it's going to be perfect, not saying that's going to lead to any, more success or not in your life, but it's the opportunity and the experience to learn something new, challenge yourself, and you're going to grow from it. So the idea of the rocking chair test is you just it's a way to it's the mindset of put yourself in the future, look backwards on what you are doing or what you're thinking about doing. And how does that, how does that impact you? So that's a rocking chair test.
That's a great one. Yeah. I love that. I try to teach that principle in my podcast. I love this thing too. This is interesting. I didn't know this, but, how the reactor engineers on those ships are trained to speak up every time they see or hear something that's even the slightest bit off base because of what's at stake. Yeah. It's a fascinating phenomenon, especially with the personality typically with an engineer is very introverted. Right. So they're trained to speak up. I'm like, that's an interesting category. What's the word? Interesting just phenomenon, because I feel like that's also just lacking in America today. A lot of people are scared to speak up against things that they know are wrong because they don't want to be chastised. Yeah. But this is how you're training the nuclear reactor engineers. So talk about that principle. I just find that so fascinating.
Yeah. I think there's some organizations that, that encourage people to speak up, right? The idea is that, hey, if something's not right, speak up. I think the organizations that do really well expect it, and require that, meaning that if you see something that's not right, or you hear something's not right, you have to speak up. It's not an optional. It's not a nice to. It's not a, hey, I'm just going to leave a note or I'll figure out. And so when the stakes are high enough, as they are when you're talking about operating a reactor, you're talking about launching airplanes off a flight deck of a carrier, you don't have time for that kind of niceness to worry about offending somebody, right? The truth matters, and speaking up when something is wrong is extremely important. So it's ingrained more in the nuclear engineering program of the Navy than I've seen anywhere else. And so you get some very young sailors, very technical, engineering oriented, that are trained right from the start. If they hear something said incorrectly, rather than let it go and therefore condone a misunderstanding, they're told to speak up. So even if I was a captain of the ship and I was down there and I make a comment like, I think the limiting pressure is 180 pounds per square inch, and I'm off, they're gonna call me on it. They're gonna go, sir, that's incorrect. It's actually 150 pounds. And in your mind, you're like, someone could say, well, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, you're talking a limit that we'll never get to anyways. I'm making these numbers up. But they're trained that no, that kind of precision and accuracy does matter in those kind of environments. And no one should be offended just because someone's speaking truth or truth to power, even if I was the captain of the ship. And they wouldn't hesitate, which I found remarkable, because it's not true in all walks of life, as we know. There's many things that you and I and everybody see or hear every day that we're uncomfortable with or we don't like, and people are like, well, I'm just not going to worry about it. And I'm not saying, this isn't a Don Quixote, you go tilt at every windmill, right? That's also not a good strategy. But there's some things that are important enough that, if you don't speak up when things are incorrect, then I think in some ways you're condoning that. You're allowing that to happen. I don't know, it was Edmund Burke or somebody, the famous quote, right? That, that evil will succeed as long as there's people unwilling to speak up. Or I'm taking liberty with the words, but, and I think Reagan even requoted that. But, the idea is that, the path to evil is paved by people not willing to speak up for truth. So it's very small when you talk about on the technical side of things, on a reactor space on a carrier. It's can seem like a small point, but it's extremely important to set that culture. And I think I saw that good cultures on a ship and good cultures in an organization not only encourage that, but they expect it and they require it. And I think that we see now in society a larger societal challenges is when's the right time to speak up, or, is it worth it? And everyone has to kind of come to that to their own, what they're comfortable with, but understand that by not speaking up, you in many ways could be condoning that kind of behavior, whatever that might be. And it's not everything's just black and white, but obviously there are things that, you feel strong enough, in your heart is wrong. Well, do you just let it go? You look the other way? Hopefully not.
Well, exactly. And that's how you got so much press for all this, and this is what inspired the book and everything. So people should get the book. It's called Surf When You Can. It comes out June 13th.
13th. Yeah.
13th. Okay. So that's when I think I'm allowed to drop this episode as well. I know you got to get going here. So I always end every episode promoting a charity or nonprofit. Is there something that you said? I think you said you worked for a nonprofit. So I don't know if people can donate to that, but I always like to end.
Yeah, they can. I work at what's called Veterans Village of San Diego, and we focus on veteran homelessness and veterans on the street that are struggling with drug abuse and substance abuse and mental health challenges. So we have a pretty large facility, and we help them kind of get back on their feet, kind of get them a job, and back out in the community. And as we know, there's a homeless challenge across the entire country for various reasons, and it's not an easy thing to solve, but I think that it takes a lot of people, right? It takes time, money, political and public will to do that. And I think, that's everyone's focused on. Here in San Diego, it's a challenge, and we're addressing that every day. My nonprofit, Veterans Village of San Diego, which I think is like vvsd.net. You can find it online. I think, our focus is the veterans that, for one reason or the other, have kind of fallen down on their luck and need a hand kind of getting out of that hole that they're in. And we bring them in and, help them out, try to get them clean and get them stable and get them jobs and get them back out there. And there's, we probably help about 3,000 veterans and veteran families in the community every year doing stuff like that. So
I love it. I love that. People should buy the book, and I will put that link to donate in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for doing this. If you're ever in Phoenix, let me know. I'll buy an espresso. Yeah.
And if you make San Diego, I'll take you surfing.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never gone. Can you teach me how to do it?
I could teach you. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'm coming this summer, so I'll hit you up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you should. We live, South Bay. We'll find a good day to surf, and I'll take you out there.
All
it's
right.
cold. It's not like Hawaii, sir. It's a little
Sure.
bit colder, but yeah, definitely
right.
hit me up. That'd be
All
fun.
right. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay.
See you. Thanks
Bye-bye.
for the time.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed that. The book is called Surf When You Can. It should be out now everywhere. And I don't know that Brett has social media, but you can support the show by following us on social media. And you can support both the show and Brett by sharing this episode on social media and liking, commenting, all that good stuff on social media and YouTube. And also make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel because all my podcast interviews are on there, but we also have some exclusive content that's only for YouTube. So I appreciate all your support for the show and for my guests. Have a great rest of your day and shoot for the moon.